series of that game, not better. Will be forgotten. It's only going to be a footnote in baseball history. Speaking of baseball, you guys should put a baseball scene in Marvel. You know there's lots of, you have to know there's lots of Avengers, so lots of
Avengers versus West Coast Avengers.
Yeah.
I want to see that. East Coast,
At least the softball league of the
yes,
It
yes.
has to happen. Yeah, make sure first thing you talk about on Monday.
Yep. This is what the man. Sean.
Oh, they shot the shawarma scene after the premiere.
Yeah.
Shoot it. This will be the end of the epilogue to Avengers 4. Good? Yeah. So much. Wow. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here early. My name is Sean Gerber. I host a YouTube channel called Superhero News. I also host a podcast called Marvel Studios News. Guess what I talk about there? So, I'm honored to be here moderating this spotlight panel on the Director of Visual Development at Marvel Studios, Mr. Andy Park. So Andy, if you don't know, got his first job drawing comics, and does anybody know who gave him his first job? Trivia. No, it was not.
Close.
That's correct.
There you go. Rob Liefeld, Deadpool.
So, yeah, the always quiet Rob Liefeld, creator of Deadpool, gave Andy his first job in comics. Andy was drawing comics for about 10 years. And then he started doing concept art for video games, and he was working at Sony doing God of War, and that's where he met the head of Marvel Studios Visual Development, Brian Meinerding, who was not the head of Marvel Studios Visual Development at the time, as well as Charlie Wen, who was the former head of visual development at Marvel Studios. They were building a team. They were assembling their own Avengers, because Marvel Studios was going to change the way concept art is typically done. And if you don't know, when it comes to the process of filmmaking, it's a very nomadic existence. Most people who work on films and television shows, they're freelancers, they're brought in for that project, and then they're unemployed after that project until they find the next project. Marvel Studios wanted to have a team that would be there to make sure they were doing the best they could and honoring the source material as they were adapting these characters from the page to the big screen. And so I believe you were their first hire, right? Or you were in that first class for the Marvel Studios visual development team?
Yeah, sorry, I was distracted.
That's fine.
But yeah, Ryan was the first one that got hired at Marvel, so he worked on Iron Man. I think you mentioned Charlie was instrumental in Thor. And so around that time, that's when Kevin and Lou D'Esposito and Troy Alonso, they came to them and said, let's form a team. So Charlie and Ryan called me up. I was the first one they hired to be in the newly formed visual development department. That was 2010. So that I got hired specifically because they knew they were going to start working on the massive film Avengers. But then when I got hired, there was still some work to be done on Captain America, First Avenger. So I was doing some stuff on that, and I did one day on Thor.
Yeah, so that was where it got started, and then a few years ago, Andy became a visual development supervisor, so he started leading visual development on films, and then he's since become the director of visual development at Marvel Studios. So now it kind of goes back and forth depending on the film that you see. It will either be led by Brian Meinerding or it will be led by Andy Park. Andy's first film that he led visual development on was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And then he's since led visual development on Thor Ragnarok, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and the upcoming Captain Marvel. By the way, if you're not from the immediate LA area, you will go up a few blocks and you can visit the 7th Street Metro Center if you want to see a filming location for Captain Marvel that appears in the trailer. So you can actually check that out. Carol Danvers is just standing there in the trailer trying to figure out what's what on Earth. So I think, Andy, everybody understands the concept artist portion of it, for the most part. You showed that off very well. But what exactly is the job that you're doing as the director of visual development on these films?
So, yeah, our main job in visual development, because people always get a little confused on do we do like the vehicles too, environments? Our main job is to design the characters. So we design all the major heroes, villains, if there's creatures, whether they're real world or CG. We're designing those characters. The other part of our job is to do keyframes. We're doing this all in the beginning of the film, even a lot of times even before it's a script, even before there's certain actors or even a director. So we're designing keyframes, which are key story moments. If there's a script, then we're basing it on that. So basically it's a still storyboard, like one moment to encapsulate a whole scene. And it's to help the directors, the producers, everyone on board to just get inspired, to be like, this could be the look and feel of the film, and it gets everyone excited.
Do you guys recognize those shots and those keyframes?
Yeah, those are done.
They're in the movie.
Yeah, those are done before, and they're never necessarily meant to be like one-to-one, this is exactly what it's going to look like in the film, but it captures the feel of that scene. So, as Sean was he was asking about my role initially as a supervisor, now as director of visual development. So now, as he mentioned, I lead a lot of our films. We have so many films going at the same time that me and Ryan, we basically have to split, which films. He led Infinity War, Spider-Man, Black Panther. I led Thor Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and the upcoming Captain Marvel. So it's kind of two jobs. I'm still a concept artist, I'm still designing the characters, I'm still doing keyframes, but the other part of my job is as a leader, I'm the one interfacing with the director, with the producers, and with the heads of all the other departments, like the costume designer, the production designer, visual effects supervisor. So I'm regularly talking to them, talking to the director. What do they want from us when it comes to any particular character? You know, if they have any ideas, if they have thoughts, certain scenes, I'll discuss with them. And then I'll have artists. I'll hire artists. We have amazing in-house artists that I'll dole out assignments. So we'll have a certain character. Like Ego, like on Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2. That was a really tough one, but that one, all hands on deck. I'll assign that, like, this is what they're thinking for Ego. He's a planet, but he's a man. So do we explore more sci-fi looks? Do we explore more...
I think everybody just remembered the question that Drag's asking. I think that's where...
Oh, yeah. How much of a fan is he? But, yeah, so we explored everything from sci-fi to more organic, different types of look based on what the story is. The story was evolving. So they'll do versions, and then after we have maybe like 20 versions, I'll go in a meeting with, like, in a room full of like 20 people with all the leadership that I mentioned, and I'll show them this is the work that we have. And then
that's not intimidating at all, is it?
It's I've been doing it for a few years now, and every time I go in that room, it's intimidating because they're all there. 20 people that can just judge our artwork, and judge they do. Sometimes I laugh and I smile in the meeting, but inside I'm like, why? We spent a lot of hours on it.
There's not enough time in the meeting to let you down easy on what they don't like, right?
It's not, they're not there to make me feel good. They're there to get the job done. So they want to see what is this, potentially these characters, what are they going to look like. So there's no time. They got to just make decisions. But it's tough because everyone has opinions, and even if one person likes it, somebody else might be like, that looks a little weird, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, it does look weird. And then back to the drawing board. And then once I get all those notes, I'll go back to my artist, give them the notes, and then from there, on a daily basis, I'll check in on them. So I'm basically art directing. And then a week later, we'll have another meeting. So basically we have weekly meetings, and then I'll do that again, room with 20 people, show them again, until we finally, the tears lessen, and then we can rejoice when we finally get an approval.
But it feels better because you went through all the rejection, right?
Yeah, you realize how much hard work it is. But the other part of my job as the director of visual development, so that's the art side of trying to get the concept design approved. Another part of my job is to work with other heads of the departments. So in particular, I work very closely with the costume designer. They're the ones who will actually make the costume, if it's not a CG character, on the actor. So that part is like crazy because we have the initial design, and then they had a tough job of like putting it on actually like the actor. So a lot of times it's one thing to make it look nice on a painting, but then to put it, as you cosplayers probably know, it's not as easy to just translate the comic book and put it on and it's gonna look awesome. Like, the human body is not, 8 heads tall, like what you see in the comic book. It's very idealized. But most humans, we have shorter legs and bigger heads, and it's very easy to get into bobblehead territory, especially with the helmeted characters. So the helmeted characters are really, really challenging. So there's a lot of back and forth where I'm working with them. There's a lot of questions about what is that material, in the design, or what are these design lines maybe need to be adjusted because they need to be able to not only look good, it has to be functional. They gotta act, perform, fight. So like on Ant-Man and Wasp, I was going back and forth to Atlanta all last year. I was flying back and forth, working with Louise Frogley and Ivo Coveney. He's the head of specialty costumes. Usually these costumes are divided into the clothing parts, fabric parts, and then the hard bits, like the helmets. On Ant-Man, he had all the, where is it? Oh gosh, I can't control this thing.
They have the moving parts.
Yeah, the gauntlets and the belt and all that stuff was, we would model that, and they would continue refining it to actually putting it on Paul Rudd, and going back and forth. We'd have fittings, so I'd have fittings with the actors, with Evangeline, Paul, trying to get the helmet. We'd do a helmet and realize, oh, it's too big, so we had to do one that's 10% smaller. There's a lot of trial and error, a lot of back and forth, and these actors have to be very patient until we finally get a final look. But it's a lot of, what you see on screen, just one of these characters, was months and months of work between myself and dozens and dozens of amazing artists.
But it is atypical, though, like your role in actually being there, working with the costume designer, working with other department heads, because that's not the way movie making typically works. Concept artists come in, they do their thing, and then they're gone, and then the movie gets made.
Yep.
And then a few years later, they see how their work was either captured or not in the movie. Because that's what always stood out to me, and how I first became a fan of Andy and the visual development team, and why I pointed out those keyframes as the shots you actually see in the movies, is as somebody who's grown up loving comic books and comic book movies, you see the art books all the time, and the concept art would rarely match what you eventually saw in the movie. But with the Marvel Studios movies, what you're doing always ends up being so much closer to what actually makes it on the screen.
Yeah, it is a unique situation, because this department doesn't really exist in other movie studios. I think the closest would be Avatar. Star Wars has somewhat of a similar thing, but it's very rare. So me and the guys that work at Marvel, we do recognize, we don't take it for granted that it is a unique situation. But I think it's a testament to Kevin Feige's vision of he wanted to create this cohesive universe. So I think they were pretty smart in getting us in-house and being able to. Because the great thing about it is, initially I got Black Widow approved on Avengers, and then from that point on, I got to design her on every single film. So there's a sense of ownership. Like Ryan Reynolds, he designed all of the Captain Americas. I got to design all the Ant-Man and all the versions, Wasp, and so it's kind of fun to revisit the character in subsequent movies.
Yeah, well, it kind of gives you almost like when a comic book artist has a definitive run for a character.
Yeah.
In their design, like a Walt Simon with Thor, or obviously Jack Kirby, Marvel Agent Comics, Steve Ditko, or John Romita Sr. for Spider-Man. You guys have that kind of legacy with your characters, at least cinematically.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to have that ownership, and they're like my little babies.
One of the things that I find really funny about getting to know you is that you do the opposite of what I think most people would think they would do if they got a job at Marvel Studios, because you get to be there and you have the opportunity to know everything, but you actually try to know as little as you can in order to do your job.
Well, it's the double-edged sword, or is that the right term? But I grew up in the '80s. I grew up with Marvel comics. That was my jam. I love those books, and so there's nowhere else I want to work. But it's also a curse because I'll never get to experience the movies the way you do. Watching it for the first time in the theater and just be like, you had no idea that was going to happen, especially if you avoid spoilers online these days. But I know too much, right? But at least for the ones where Ryan's leading, I intentionally try to back away a little bit. Of course I'm gonna we work in the same office room, or not the exact same room, but in the same department. So I'm gonna know a lot, and I'm gonna see what everyone's working on. So I'm like, oh, hey, that's gonna happen, all right.
Well, I remember they got you with Infinity War, because we were at the premiere, and then I immediately, because I saw you before, so I ran over to Andy's seat after the movie.
Yeah.
Because there were some big surprises in there, and there were actually something you didn't know about.
Yeah, that one. There's certain movies where I'm like, okay, I really don't want to know, because I want to experience it at the premiere as fresh as I can. So Infinity War, because we have early screenings, right? But I refuse, I'm not going to go to those. So I want to see it at the premiere. So of course I knew a lot, but there were some stuff I didn't know. I didn't know, wait, is there anyone who hasn't watched it yet? Should not be here. She didn't watch it yet. Laura dies. I didn't know that was necessarily going to happen, especially the way she was going to die. So that whole scene was very powerful. I was like, Gosh, God. Yeah. And there was a couple others where I was like, there's a lot of like, I know what's gonna happen, I just don't know exactly how the pieces are gonna connect in that movie, so watching that was, at the premiere was awesome. That was really awesome.
Let's talk a little bit about Captain Marvel, because I know we're going to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I know
Not much to say.
if I know Marvel fans, I know they also want to know what's next. But you finally can share the concept art that was at, it was premiered at Comic-Con, not this past year, but the year before.
Yep.
And then you had to basically just suffer through everybody sharing blurred photos of poly screens.
Yeah, and everyone tweeting me like, please give me the high res. I was like, I want to.
But let's talk about the costume design, because this is another one where I think it's one of the best adaptations from page to screen. And obviously this was a redesign from Jamie McKelvey for Kelly Sue DeConnick's run that started in 2012. So it's pretty cool to see you have the opportunity to incorporate something so recent from the comics that just immediately became a hit. But can you talk about just capturing that design? Because this movie is obviously a big deal for a lot of reasons for Marvel Studios,
Yep.
for everybody who's in the Carol Corps. So can you talk a little bit about just bringing that design? I know you can't say anything else, but since everybody knows what the suit looks like, you can talk about that.
Yeah, that was, it's definitely one of the favorite designs I got to do, and I think the more modern suits, like, for example, Ant-Man, like, kind of saw for a second the original design. Those are the ones where it's like, it's really fun to cosplay that kind of stuff, but then if you saw that in the movie with the big chrome bobblehead, it'd be more comedy, right? It wouldn't be taken seriously as much. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but so that our job is to always kind of translate, to be true to the comics source material, but bring it into the reality that the MCU has created, and of course for the story that we're trying to tell. But for the more modern designs, like Captain America, Winter Soldier's like stealth suit, as well as this modern version of Captain Marvel, it's easier to be a little bit more direct because it's already really cool and it already has a modern sensibility. But of course, we need to adjust it based on the story. I can't tell you the story beyond what you've seen in the trailer, but myself, as well as maybe 4 other artists, we all, initially we took a stab at all different versions. Can't go into depths of the types of versions we've done, but so you can tell I'm thinking as I'm talking.
But it involves a lot of, it's not just unique to Captain Marvel, but I don't think people totally understand the research portion of it. You guys have obviously access to a full Marvel library to go pouring through pages of comics, because even this costume for Captain Marvel, it's already had little tweaks with each new artist who's come in and done their piece to it. So
yeah, Christopher Ongo had a little bit of adjustments.
It allows you guys to come in and really just take the best of what everybody's doing, as well as bring whatever you need to in order to make it work on a living human being.
Yeah, so I definitely did versions that were, I love the design that Jamie McKelvey, his redesign of Captain Marvel. So of course, that was the one where I was like, okay, I hope it kind of looks like that. But so we're always gonna do the range. We're gonna do one that's very faithful to the comic. We're gonna veer away from it, and then kind of give them a range so that they can decide. Certain directors want it to be like, I want it to be like the comic. Like Taika Waititi was like, I want Hela to look like the comic with those big old antlers. But we did versions that were a little bit more palatable or realistic in a way, where it's coming out of her back. But myself and the other artists, we did a lot of versions of Captain Marvel. Eventually, the one that you see in the film, on the trailer, is very, it's quite faithful to Jamie McKelvey as well as Christopher Ongo. I definitely took nods from both of those designs.
Now, for the Wasp this year, as you were leading Ant-Man and the Wasp, that was a little bit different, because the suit that everybody saw at the end of Ant-Man, that didn't physically exist, right?
No, that was designed way at the end when they decided to do that end tag. So I did that design, and that was just a CG added at the end.
Yeah. So when it came time to actually design a costume for Evangeline Lilly, and obviously you talked about taking several trips to Atlanta and racking up the frequent flyer miles. So, with these films though, with Ant-Man and the Wasp being the first Marvel Studios film that has a female hero in the marquee, and then of course the first female-led solo film of Captain Marvel, I'm sure there's a unique pressure to make sure you're getting those right, because you know that people have had to wait much too long to have these films in the first place.
Wait, what do you, what's the
Is, is there an additional pressure on that though? Because you know how important these movies, yeah, it's how important they are to the present, but also future of Marvel Studios.
Yeah, I mean, I was excited because when they finally told us the title, I was like, that's awesome. And, you know, I think some of you probably read what Evangeline wrote, you know, when they told her through an email, I think. Or they sent her the logo, so she was like squealing, I think, she said something like that. But yeah, I don't know about there's extra, there is pressure, definitely, because, you know, you knew, but I think all of them, you feel pressure because they're all essentially, even if they're not in the main title, they're all main characters, you know, Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, they're all main characters. So somehow, yeah, throughout my career, it's not intentional, it wasn't planned, no one set out to make it happen. But I've worked on a lot of like female characters, even back in the day when I drew comic books. You know, I drew Tomb Raider, and then when I got to Marvel, you know, like we're all designing, but somehow that they would end up picking my female character designs, and I'm completely honored. I definitely see it. I take pride in that, right? So yeah, designing Wasp, designing Captain Marvel, you know, it's definitely an honor, and it's a pleasure. There's unique challenges, you know, designing for a guy and a girl, you know, obviously because there's differences. So I think being able to, I think Marvel's really good in, you know, kind of treading that line of always keeping the characters, you know, idealized, attractive, but being respectful, you know, as well, you know, not, you know, typically in comics in the past, you know, so it's been a male-dominated type of industry, so a lot of the costumes, like Gamora was an original costume from the comics, it's like, you know, I saw that, I'm like, yeah, we're not going to do that, you know. Plunging, like, Borat style, swimsuit. It's probably not going to happen in the MCU. So, but I feel like I know we've done a decent job of like still being faithful to the comic, but being respectful and to male and females. Yeah, in general.
Well, speaking of being faithful to the comic, just speaking for myself, I think the MCU is by and large, like, especially visually, like the most faithful set of live-action adaptations that we've seen coming from comic books. I don't really know if there's much debate, but where does that come from? Because obviously, I mean, I know you're a comic book fan, but it seems like if you walk into Marvel Studios, you're just automatically going to be surrounded by people who really genuinely love this stuff and respect it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, everything starts and ends with Kevin Feige, right? He's the one who, he's the visionary, he's the leader, he's the Steve Jobs, whatever you want to call him. He's the secret, not secret, but he is the main ingredient because he's the one, at the end of the day, he is a fanboy. He loves Marvel Comics. He was a fan as growing up, and at the same time, I think what makes him perfect is he's a great filmmaker. So you take those two things together, and he knows how to be respectful to the comics, and he knows what fans want because he is a fan. But he also knows what it takes to make good films. He used to work with Donner.
Laura Schuler Donner.
Yep. And he worked on the original X-Men films,
Yeah,
Spider-Man.
That was his first producing job was as an associate producer on X-Men in 2000. And the famous story about Kevin Feige and how much of a fanboy he was is he was the guy in the hair and makeup trailer making Hugh Jackman's hair bigger.
Oh, I didn't know that.
To look like Wolverine. I know you had a similar instance like that, although you lost the battle with Scarlet Witch's headband.
Yeah, there's certain things where, yeah, I mean, you saw it for a second, and even as I'm doing it, painting it, you know, when I paint, or I design, my job is for the producer, for the director. I'm there to serve them. But I'm also here to serve you guys. I'm here to serve the fans. which means I'm just serving myself. So in all my designs or my options that I do, I'm doing both. I'm like, okay, I know they want this. So Scarlet Witch, I knew, okay, they don't want to. They never asked for it. They never said don't do it. But I'm like, I know they don't want it. I'm just still gonna do a version, right? I'm gonna show them. And then in the latest, was it Civil War? I did a version where I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just give her a headband, at least just a nod to have something there. So I did a version there, but then and in the meeting I was showing it to them, and then I just hear chuckles and laughter. I laughed too, and I was like,
They're all looking at you and you're just going,
yeah.
you had to try.
Yep.
So we are going to open it up for questions in just a second. I know, Andy, you brought some freebies to give away for some really interesting and insightful questions there.
Yeah.
So get those prepared. The last thing I want to ask you before we turn it over to all of you here is when it comes to Marvel Studios, I know you're all very, very humble, but you're all very, very good at what you do. So, and you've done such an amazing job with Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is the 10th anniversary, and I know 10 years isn't the longest time in the world, but the MCU is clearly not just a flash in the pan. Marvel Studios had their best year ever this year, like over $4 billion off of just 3 movies. So, what do you attribute that success to? If there's anyone, obviously being fanboys and everything and wanting to honor the source material, but you're also connecting with a bunch of people who've never read a comic book in their life. So what do you feel is the secret to what Marvel Studios has been able to accomplish in these 10 years?
I mean, everything starts with Iron Man, right? That movie, that was not what it was. So there's something that I've told this to Kevin too, that I feel like there's something called like movie magic, right? And that's part of the reason why we love to go to the theater. But throughout the year, if you watch like a dozen movies in a year, how many of those do you usually say are good, right? And for some reason, it's not 12. But you see those end credits, and you're like, that's thousands of people. That's everyone who's trying to make a living for their families, and everyone who has a passion, for what they're doing. Nobody's trying to make a flop. Nobody's trying to make a bad movie. So why is only like half of the 12 that you watch actually good? It is because of that movie magic that I mentioned. That even if you have a good script, it can fall apart if you have bad casting. Even if you have a good script and you have good casting, it can fall apart if it has bad visual effects, and then so forth. You keep on adding those elements, and then you have every element that's amazing, the directing, the story, the writing, the visual effects, but then if you have bad editing, all of a sudden the movie is pacing and it just doesn't make sense, and they left out this, and it makes it confusing for the audience, things don't connect. It's all these puzzle pieces that come together to make this mosaic. But if all the pieces of the mosaic are jumbled up and it's not put in the right order, all of a sudden you can't tell what you're looking at. And again, everyone is trying to make a good film. So there is something called movie magic, where things come together and history is being made. So certain films, like I think Iron Man was one of those movies where, you get Jon Favreau, you get Kevin Feige, you get Robert Downey Jr., the rest of the cast, and then you get the designs, that Ryan did, and Phil Saunders and Adi Granov did. You put all those things together, and you had this, they didn't, even when they're doing the movie, it's not like they know, nobody knows. People always ask that kind of question, did you know this was special? I mean, I think they know it's special, but they don't know if it's going to work. They don't know if they're going to do their best. Obviously, Jon Favreau is going to do his best, but he can't guarantee, it's going to work
to them, but they don't know if it's going to be special to everybody else.
Yeah, but then when I don't know if everyone loved it, but when I watched it, because I was an Iron Man fan, but not everyone in the world was. Most people didn't, they just knew who he was, but they weren't fans of Iron Man. But instantly after watching that film, he gained a lot of fans, and I think that movie, with the charisma of Robert Downey Jr., just everything, every piece of that puzzle, there was movie magic that happened in that film, and I think that set the tone for the subsequent movies, and that's how you're able to, and then it continued to happen. Because if anywhere along the lines, if let's say Captain America was just a flop, or Thor was a flop. Avengers might have been a flop, right? But because you had Captain America and people, they liked it, and it worked. You have, someone from World War II and come in and you believe that character. And then the hardest for me during that time when I was watching those movies and I started working there, I was like, okay, if Thor doesn't work, Avengers will not work. Because right now they've done a good job of establishing science, right? It's not fake movie science, but it's to the point where you accept it. You're not going to be like, yeah, right, a guy can't wear armor. Like you're like, okay, I know this is a movie, but I buy it. It's cool. But for Thor, it was like we're entering into outer space, a god. So we're like, how the heck are they going to make us believe that there's somebody like that out there? And they were able to bridge that gap, I think that what is that line that Thor said about your magic is our science?
Yeah.
There's little lines like that where you're just like, okay, I'll take that.
Same.
Yeah, and they did infuse a lot of science in Thor as well, with the Rosenberg.
But I think the main thing though throughout the Marvel movies is whether it's Iron Man or the talking raccoon or the tree, Marvel has taken characters that a lot of people barely knew or didn't know at all and made them household names. And I think it's because part of that movie magic is the focus on character. It's always character.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was leading to, basically, it is the characters. Like Tony, Steve, Thor.
But even the fact that you refer to him that way, because growing up, people talked about Batman, Superman, I called them by their hero names, but we don't really say Iron Man and Captain America nearly as often as we say Tony and Steve.
Yeah. And I think the Guardians of the Galaxy, people loved that movie because of the characters. I think Captain America, his journey has been amazing. He's not a character that I really was a fan of growing up, but now he's my favorite. Just him in the story, the story that they've told of him has been great. And then Tony, and that's why when we watch Civil War, that in battle is just them fighting each other, just hand to hand, mano a mano. But it meant so much because it was like, wow, we've seen the journey they've been on, and look at them fighting. And then leading into Infinity War, I think that's why Infinity War did so well, because you care about each of these characters, some more than others. But you're like, holy cow! After 20 films, you're seeing all of them on their journey. But I think Marvel's done a really good job of, you don't have to know the comic. I think the majority of the movie-going audience who watch these films, they're not comic book fans. I think now they're fans of the characters, but they're not. It's not because we're just getting comic book fans watching these movies.
Definitely not. So let's go ahead and let's open it up for Carol's hand went up first, so shot right up. So go ahead.
What was the experience of designing Carol's new helmet like?
Oh yeah. Oh, I see one over there.
Very cool.
As I mentioned, helmets like this. Helmets are really hard. Helmets are hard, because it has to. We want to avoid the bobblehead look. So it has to be comfortable on the actor, and nobody likes these helmets on their faces, especially when we're making it as small as possible. So.
Especially for an actor who has to use their face.
Yeah, and it's always uncomfortable, and in order to avoid being the bobblehead, we have to get tighter and tighter to the head, and all of a sudden now it gets claustrophobic. So it gets really challenging, but I was up for the challenge. I definitely wanted that look, because I loved when they're in their helmets, like Thor right here. He loves it too, right there. But not so much because he took it off, but which happens a lot. But it was really fun. The extra challenge of I'm in that area where I'm like being careful what I say. That you saw it in the trailer.
Yes, in the trailer.
The hair is hard because it's a very unique helmet because it's got that mohawk. It's like, how do you do this one? But
it's also maybe the most streamlined helmet that you guys have ever done. The only thing that's close is caps. Because the Ant-Man helmet is a little bit bigger, even Thor's helmet's a little bit bigger, but it's a very form-fitting helmet that you have, and there's not like the material doesn't appear to be like very thick at all.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like I designed it. One of our in-house guys, Adam Ross, modeled it, and then we had an outside vendor do the actually building of it, and there was a lot of back and forth. The other challenge of that helmet is because it's on a female, so it's like it has to be. Just like I mentioned, designing for a female, you want to tread that line of being. They're not males. They're females, so you want to celebrate that. So you can't just be like masculine looking. You want it to be feminine. But you want it to look strong. So you're balancing a lot of stuff, and that helmet is very comic booky. So that's why I was excited to take on that challenge. But it was challenging, and I hope when you see it in the film that it totally works.
It's pretty good in the trailer. Let's go over here.
What's the day-to-day like for you when you get into the office, plus all the time that you have to put into your own painting? What's the turnaround for you? With your guys underneath you?
Yeah, for the rest of the artists, like what I used to do before I was a leader was just 10 hours a day painting, and then we go out and get some good food. And it's fun. It's fun being in the studio, and we can talk shop. Once I became a director of visual development, it became extra. It's like 2 jobs now because I have to still try to produce as much artwork as I used to do, which is kind of impossible. But I'm also like leading, so a lot of every day is different. Like I'll have meetings with directors or the producers, and then the other thing I'm doing is meeting with other artists. So I'll go to their desk, look at what they're working on, and then we'll have discussions about what they're working on. I'll critique it, I'll art direct it. We'll come up with ideas together. I have some remote artists that I have to work with, so there's a lot of like Skype or emails. And then depending on where we are in the production, I have to go drive to the costume department and look at the costume on the mannequin, or if there's a fitting. There's a lot of meetings I have to go to. So there's many days where it's 4 p.m. and I haven't sat at my desk to paint yet. But for me inside, I'm like, I feel like that's like kind of like my main job. So there's this stress of like, oh crap, it's already 4 or 5 o'clock and I haven't painted yet. So I'm painting a lot at night. Even when I go home, I paint a lot of weekends. It's tough.
You also have to staff, right? Like, you have to hire people.
Yeah, we definitely have to hire people depending on the project.
Let's go to this side.
What inspired you to start all this?
Just this job. Well, it started from my love of comic books, right? So I drew comic books for 10 years. And then I made a switch in my career in 2005 to become a concept artist. That's when I got hired at Sony for the God of War video game series. I worked there for 5 years, but my true love was more film, and in particular, the Marvel. Like when I was working at Sony, that's when I worked there for 5 years, and I remember one of the days Sony let us go during the middle of the day to watch Iron Man, and I watched that with my coworkers, and I was just blown away, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then when the end credit scene, when Nick Fury came out, I think I was the only one who like cheered, because I knew exactly what that meant. No one else knew what that meant. Like, why is Sam Jackson in this film? But I was like, oh my gosh, they're leading to Avengers. Like that was one of those things where, as a teenager with my friends, I'd be like, you can't do an Avengers film. Like that's impossible. You can't do a Justice League film. Like I wish they could, but that's impossible. You can't have like 5 main heroes in one film and give them good enough screen time in just 2 hours. Like it's impossible.
Well, and for Marvel at the time, a lot of their characters were like the licensed out to different studios.
Yeah.
They've kind of always been able to do it, but Marvel has only been more recently that they've been able to do some of this stuff.
Yeah. So Marvel's where I wanted to go, and in particular Avengers.
All right. Let me go to we'll do over here, and then I'll go to Carol with the helmet. Go ahead.
So with characters like Ant-Man, where it was really different from the comic version, do you have like sort of visual language that you adhere to that is sort of similar to your characters? Like cohesive, like are you sculpting them as you're going and you know exactly what you're designing?
Wait, can you clarify that?
So like when you're designing characters that are really different have a clear idea of what it is that you're like designing, or do you have like certain, I guess, tools that you can like rely on that you can be like, okay, let's go down this avenue? Like, how do you go about that?
Well, I think, that's the fun of being a concept artist, like problem solving. So for Ant-Man, it was really fun because initially I was working with Edgar Wright and his brother Oscar. So that was great because they wanted to change up the origin, right? It's not Hank Pym in present day. It's Scott Lang. It's actually Hank Pym, but it was in the 60s, like when he built that suit. Versus in the comic, it was more present day when he made the suit. So that was kind of cool. So from that point on, then you kind of knew, okay, this is going to be a retro-looking suit. So I have to adhere to those kind of materials, to what was available in the 60s. So I'm looking at a lot of like astronaut suits, right? Edgar mentioned a movie called Diabolique. Yeah, and I think it was more like this guy in all leather, that kind of thing. So I think, and obviously having that feel a little bit more retro. So that's why being able to do a more astronaut type of, knowing it's a containment suit. So I kind of knew I need to stay in that kind of realm. Astronauts, the materials, what was available during that time, knowing that they're pin particles. So I knew that I was going to do exposed piping throughout the whole suit. Versus if it was a modern day suit, maybe it would be hidden, right? All the pipes. But it's so fun to be able to do exposed piping, very clunky. Like you have these you see the connectors and everything, and then you even see this pipe that goes from the backpack to his head, which is completely impractical. You cut that off, he dies. But you ignore that part and they knew that, they talked about that, like, yeah, if they cut it off, he'll die, right? But they're like, but it looks cool. But no one's gonna complain about it. So yeah, we're always looking at the problem we're trying to solve, based on the story. And that's what will dictate, like design, materials, all that kind of stuff.
Captain Marvel?
Yeah. Kind of going off that, your job is kind of adaptation. Has there been like one costume piece or one piece of character that you feel like you've added to what kind of character?
I would like to take all of them, but yeah, because I think that is our job. It's not. Some people, when I tell them my job, they're like, they're confused. They're like, wait, but that character's already in the comic. Would you just make that? No. You have to translate it and definitely change it, adapt it. I would like to think, even like Captain Marvel, it's faithful to the comic, but I think in the comic, for the most part in the comic, what is comic book designs usually? It's a naked body with lines on it, because they need to redraw the character over and over again. Like I designed Ant-Man, and I do commissions, whenever I go to conventions, and when I have to draw that helmet, I'm like cursing at myself. I'm like, oh my god, this is so hard to draw. It's like there's so many it's like functional. You have to make sure all the forms are going the right direction and perspective, everything.
You can never draw 22 pages of that every month.
Yeah, so that's why in comic books there's a simplicity, and there's a grace to that simplicity. But when I'm translating it for the real world, like in Captain Marvel, even though it is based on Jamie McKelvey and Christopher Anka's design, there's a lot of differences and a lot of nuances, and the fact that it's more like armor, that's a thing. Why isn't there a sash? That's probably one of your questions. There's reasons. I can't go into that kind of stuff, but yeah, I think I would like to think, in all the designs we're trying to add something. We're not just it's not a one-to-one translation. Just like our movies, none of our movies are. It's called Civil War, based on loosely Infinity Gauntlet and all that kind of stuff, but it's never one-to-one. We are trying to add, to it.
The closest one-to-one is the Star Spangled Banner version of Captain America.
Yes. Yes.
Which is totally a bit.
Yeah. Exactly. It's supposed to be comical.
Let's go over here.
Okay, so I have two questions. They're both short. So one is for Ant-Man. When Edgar Wright left, was that sort of hard because when Peyton Reed, did you have to start from scratch with a new director for Ant-Man, the first one?
No, that was a unique situation because Peyton came in after we were already designed a lot of stuff, and he was there though when I was designing Wasp and stuff. But we didn't have to start all over.
Another question is, have you done a costume like you thought it wasn't good the first time? So was there a costume that you liked when you improved that costume for the next movie?
Yeah, you know what? Captain America: Civil War. I know there's always that. You know, which costume's the best, right? The first Ant-Man, and then I did Captain America: Civil War's Ant-Man's updated suit.
And then you changed it back for Ant-Man the Wasp, more like the first Ant.
Yeah. So that's what's fun. Like I get to like revisit these kind of designs. And when I look at the Ant-Man Civil War costume, I'm like a little surprised. I'm like, oh wow, I really deviated from the original design. Like it's quite a big jump, right? A lot of times these costumes, they're barely a jump. Sometimes in Iron Man, some people are like, oh, what's the difference? You know, there's that kind of stuff.
I can see the difference because like the Wasp and Ant-Man the Wasp has a similar mask to the Ant-Man Civil War. See why you changed it back to make them very distinct.
Yeah. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, the thing that with Peyton as well, because Peyton wasn't there to design, wasn't there. It was the Russo brothers, right?
Yeah.
So Peyton, there were certain things that Peyton wanted to bring back from the old Ant-Man that he liked. So that's essentially why I essentially took the Civil War costume, the Ant-Man costume, made it modern, but brought it, kind of bridged those two things.
The blue one. Okay, yeah.
So, do you see any of your work working its way back into the comics? Like, do you see your influence sort of like being reinterpreted by new comics to sort of like go, oh, right, this is the new version of what this comic book character is?
That's part of the really cool things, like, because I think we do these films, people enjoy them. It makes its way into other mediums, like video games. There's like those mobile app, a lot of Avengers, Marvel games, and a lot of them are direct, from the costumes we've done, like Hela and Ant-Man, Wasp.
Contest of Champions.
Yeah, Contest of Champions, like all of them, even Black Widow and Hawkeye. In the animation, you could tell like, oh wow, they're looking at our designs, and that I forgot which one it was. There's so many different versions, but Ant-Man, you could tell that they took our designs and they made it more palatable, because I think they're looking at new audiences to watch these films and a lot of these movies or TV shows. So a lot of them, they're not necessarily comic book fans, but they've seen the movies. So and in the comics, they're starting to do stuff like that too. Like I think, what's her name? Valkyrie. I think they're taking Tessa's design and they're, I think it's kind of cool. And
They redid Star-Lord too. But
Yeah.
It was even after they gave him the helmet that he has in the movie.
Yep.
Go like farther to the back, like right there. You on the end of the aisle. No, you right there. Yeah, shaking your hand.
Both of you at last Comic-Con, we were talking about you would love to work on X-Men because they were some of your favorite characters, and the merger was up in the air. Have you or any of your team messed around with ideas or concepts for any of your characters?
Not yet.
In accordance with the Department of Justice, no.
I know. I hope
Technically can't do that.
we're hoping, because it's not
All the way in the
it
back.
hasn't happened yet.
Yep, you.
Sorry.
So there's a featurette in the Ant-Man and the Wasp of disc about the visual department. You mentioned that Taika Waititi wanted you to have Hela's helmet to stay cute. Has there ever been any other instance where the director wanted you to keep something that you thought, oh, there's no way they would want you to keep it on, but they said, no, keep it.
No. Is there any other instances where they wanted to? I think that's Taika's unique, right? He's awesome, but he was surprising, and I think he was the only one where he wanted me to do a design where I was like, the concept artist who's making stuff for reality in me is like, can that be done? You have this 5-foot wingspan stemming from the head out. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. He wants me to do it, so I'll do it. But I was like, it's up to the visual effects supervisor to figure out how to make it look like not ridiculous. Because every time you turn the head, it's gonna be like, right? But they did an amazing job. I think at the end of the day, they did tone it down a little bit. So if you see my paintings, they're really like way out there. But I think they kind of had to bring it in a little bit. But I think he's the only one I can think of.
what else would you expect from a guy who rocks a pineapple romper? He's awesome. We have another Captain Marvel over here.
To go along with that, have you ever designed something and then had the costume designer say, no, that's not going to work?
There's always a lot of back and forth because that's part of the collaborative process. Because there's a lot of conversations that I'll have with the costume designer where they'll say like, you know, you designed this thing, and here's one example on Captain Marvel, where around the shoulder area, like it's gonna be hard to like. This area is always tough because you need to like. There's a lot of movement. Where else on your body can you do this almost like 360 kind of movement? So we kind of knew there's gonna have to be some compromises. There's gonna be a bigger gap here. So if you see in the movie, there is a bigger gap from the shoulder deltoid armor piece to the beginning of the chest piece. So there's definitely conversations on that. When I was in Ant-Man and Wasp, when I was in the department, there was a lot of conversations of like, do you need this line? And there's times where I'm like, yeah, I think it's important because of this reason, you know, because of design, the reason why it's there is this and that, right? Other times you could be like, you know what, I think it'll be fine if we get rid of that kind of line. So this conversation. Definitely.
All right, time for, I can do two more if they're quick. In the back with the hat. Yep, you.
Why is Iron Man your favorite character? Or why was he?
It was because of the Silver Centurion suit. That was designed by Bob Layton, drawn by Mark Bright. I wasn't a comic book fan in junior high. I went to the comic book store. I saw the cover too, and you saw it earlier. Number 200, Iron Man 200, and it was him fighting Ironmonger. And that suit, so I'm also aware of that gold, the original design, the gold and red suit, but for some reason that Silver Centurion suit, when it went silver, the shoulder piece coming out, that one really spoke to me, and I was just like, that looks awesome. And from that point on, I collected everything that I could that had him, every appearance he made. But then that suit only lasted for like, what, 20 issues, and then he went back to the gold, and I stopped collecting Iron Man. I tried. It was that suit, just for some reason, I loved that suit, and when I got to design that suit for Iron Man 3, I was just like, oh my god, I want to go back to junior, tell my junior high self, guess what?
Got time for one more, so let's do the first in line today, so we're close to first in line.
What was your most memorable experience for any of the
This channel with all of you.
This moment right now. There's so many memorable moments. I think, timing-wise, some of the greatest moments are like this. you know, spending the amount of months that I do on these designs, and then, you know, working with the actor, and then going on set, like going to Civil War. You know, this was like over 100 degrees weather. They're wearing this leather suit. I was dying wearing what I'm wearing. Imagine Paul, he's trying to smile, but his hair. And then this for the Ant-Man and Wasp. So going on set, watching it, is very special because I see all the work that not only myself, but my team of artists, you know, the blood, sweat, and tears, and the other departments, you know, working in to watch them perform in these suits, and I think seeing, like, Evangeline in particular, like, she loved her suit. And usually these actors are like, they love being in these movies, but they don't love their suit. They usually kind of just bear it because it's very uncomfortable. She loved it, you know, and she was very happy. You can tell, look at her smile. I think being able to see that excitement and seeing the fulfillment, and then of course going to the premiere and watching it in its totality, it's like, and when it's actually good, it's like, it's a special feeling.
Well, as somebody alluded to before we wrap up real quick, just make sure if you haven't got Ant-Man and the Wasp on Blu-ray already, or if you have, you do use your digital redemption code, because there is a digital-only special feature. You can access it through like iTunes or Vudu, whatever digital platform you use. It's not available on the disc, but it is available digitally. You can see a featurette that's dedicated to Andy and the visual development team. It's a great feature. Enjoy the rest of your day at LA Comic Con.
And one more thing, the people who have asked questions, don't lie. Come up here. Oh, who's it?
Is Loki alive? Oh! No comment.
Yeah, whoever asked the question, come up here, I got a print for you.
Thank you all so much. Give it up one more time for Andy Park.
Yeah. There you go. Oh, you get that? Oh, not this side.
We got some. Oh, it's Captain Marvel approaching.
Which is, oh, Corey. Yeah. Okay, no. I'm pretty sure he's gone now. I mean, he's never dead forever. A lot of it.